Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here with you all. I'm a long-time SaaStock fan. I remember 4 or 5 years ago going across to Dublin with the business that I co-founded, Ideo, that, as Alex just said, we exited in November 2019. I then spent a couple of years working with the acquirer on a roll-up, buying some other SaaS businesses and rolling them together, and then have come back earlier stage as CMO of Paddle, serving the marketing team here. So I'm really excited to be here with you. And I'm really excited to kind of go through a bit of data we've been digging into over the last few weeks. And before we do that, I'd just like to share a little personal story. You can see on screen, hopefully you can see my slides. You can see on screen a picture of a beautiful canoe trip down the Loire Valley. That's my family, my wife and 2 kids. This is one of my favorite holidays. We do this year after year. I hope to replicate it again this summer. And I love it. As a founder, I love it because it's cheap and it's full of adventure. What we do is spend a week canoeing probably 100 kilometers or more down the river, and we camp each night on the sandbars of the Loire. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's off the grid. We cook on an open fire every single night. And my kids aren't allowed their devices. I'm not allowed my phone. And we just have an absolute idyllic time. But a few years ago, that all changed. We hit a massive thunderstorm about 2 a.m. in the morning. A thunderstorm blew in. There are about 40,000 lightning strikes in that area alone, and winds of about 90 miles an hour. And we were camped a few inches above the waterline. As you can see these tents here. I remember screenshotting on my phone the weather report as I quickly looked it up. This is 1:37 in the morning, it says. And that was the weather front coming through. We hadn't expected it and hadn't seen it coming. We've been waiting in the beautiful sunshine, but it suddenly hit us. And you can see a photo there of my daughter, aged about 7, hiding under a canoe. We woke up, the 2 tents blew over, the poles broke, and we pulled back the canoes about 40 yards from the edge of the water, flipped them over, and my family slept underneath them for a couple of hours as this storm blew through. Now, what's that got to do with SaaS? Well, as a SaaS founder and taking my kids on holidays like this, I'm really aware that there are these invisible barriers. There was an invisible barrier that we didn't see coming, this storm front that was coming through the beautiful afternoon that we didn't know it was approaching us with ferocity. And as a SaaS founder, we wanted to focus on product and on customer, and yet legal and compliance and regulatory challenges kept coming in our way. And one of the reasons I joined Paddle is that it's got this product proposition, but also its research and content proposition, which is to remove the invisible barriers to SaaS growth. And we're not going to dig into the product here. We're going to talk about some of our research of how SaaS companies can grow faster and how we can help remove the invisible barriers to your SaaS growth. So this is all coming out of a report that we recently published. We dug into SaaS companies across 84 countries, 3,000 of our customers, as well as interviews with a whole bunch of SaaS decision makers. And we broke it down into 3 key takeaways. Basically, it's important to go deep on customer experience, and we'll talk about what that means: segmentation, channel strategies, dynamic pricing. You've got to enable new growth models, which includes thinking about how you actually work with product-led and sales-led growth and the hybrid mix. And then there's a whole piece in there about talent, how you need to retain your best and refresh the rest. And we're going to focus on those first 2 today. But before we do that, we've seen a real bifurcation in the data, in the growth rates of the SaaS companies we surveyed. As we go through the last 2 calendar years, there are a whole bunch of COVID-19 beneficiaries. Businesses that were involved with infrastructure or remote work or remote selling that really saw a massive kick as a result of a lot of the close downs in the physical world that happened due to COVID-19. And they went on this emotional journey, but actually it's become much harder in the last year as that curve has flattened. We've seen layoffs at Hopin and Peloton and a bunch of other companies. On the flip side, there is a bunch of companies that are in our base who face the opposite problem. They initially saw things really slow down. Maybe buyers were risk adverse and funding was lost, or perhaps they were part of the vertical that was most affected, hospitality or tourism. But then they're seeing a very, very strong bounce back. And so they're seeing kind of the opposite side of that same set of emotions. And in our base, in the 3,000 customers that we serve, they're mostly towards those COVID-19 beneficiaries. They're part of that infrastructure, they're dev tools, and they saw 40%, 46% more growth in that first year than the second year. And in this data, we see that actually only 51% of those businesses we surveyed are expecting to hit their sales target. So they're on that yellow curve. But all this to say, it doesn't matter whether you're sleeping easy at night right now or really struggling to hit your quota. People have faced both sides of that curve over the last couple of years. So let's dig into a few tips from the data that we pulled out. Firstly, localization, it matters. So it's never too early to start tailoring currencies and payment methods. A couple of bits of data that came out of the research we did here. Number one, if you have two different currencies on offer to your customer base rather than one, you will likely grow 12.7% faster when we look at the base of sellers we examined. If you offer 25 different currency options instead of one, that will be correlated with growing 25% faster. And if you just offer one alternative payment method, you'll grow 22% faster. So you can see there some significant growth rates that are accelerated by currency options and payment options. So offering localization. And when we think about this, one of my colleagues, Ulika, put it this way: other than just language, there are really three levers that you've got to pull: local currency, payment methods, and spending power. Think about all three of those, because the combination of those have a powerful compound effect on your growth. So then diving into those payment methods, this changes on a territory by territory basis because different payment methods are associated with different with different geos. If we look at it across the world, these are the growth rates that are associated with showing these as options within your checkout if you're a product-led company. Really interesting to see those upticks across the board. Secondly, the embrace of a hybrid go-to-market. What we can see from that first piece is that more does mean more, and we'll see the same point echoed here as well. It rarely takes a single motion to scale. We see a big difference in the way that the US startup scene and the European or rest of the world startup scene goes to market. In the US, startups normally go up market earlier and then they internationalize later. Whereas in Europe, we often reverse that order, internationalizing really early and only going up market into the enterprise once we're working across many different territories. And I think that breeds a real strength in the European scene because we've already done a lot of the hard work on how we deal with different languages and payments and currencies and support lingo. And that blows us in great stead. And I think we've seen a fantastic array of product-led companies in Europe being able to scale as a result of that wide geographic footprint from an early stage. Adam Schonfeld over at Peer Signal uses this phrase a lot from his data, and we see it come out in ours as well, which is that product-led does not mean product only. Product-led is the cool kid on the block right now. Everyone's talking about PLG this and PLG that. But it's important to know that it doesn't mean no salespeople. It doesn't mean no reps. In fact, if we dig into some of Adam's data that we covered in this report, it's really interesting to see that there's just loads of differing hiring strategies when it comes to adding sales on top of product-led growth. Firstly, almost every product-led company does add sales at some point. And as you can see here, you've got that line down the middle of the graph, which is that a lot of people just added sales in line with people that wouldn't consider themselves product-led. Their rate of sales growth, of sales people growth was the same. And actually, there's 25% of the companies that we surveyed, they actually were growing their sales force faster than those who would not consider themselves PLG. So it's really interesting that there's a whole bunch of product-led companies that are rapidly hiring sales reps. Secondly, we are seeing this on both sides. We're seeing product-led companies that started out with just a checkout experience, serving people everywhere with a low cost, a freemium product, all of those normal characteristics of product-led growth, and are adding sales teams and going up into the enterprise, often faster than norm. But then on the opposite side, we're seeing a really interesting trend with big scaled public SaaS businesses wanting to understand how they can quickly add product-led product sets, product-led lines of business. And we're seeing job titles like emerging business units or future businesses come up and want to understand the payment methods and the way of scaling as a separate silo in their business, a PLG line of business. So it's coming from both ways. Sales-led are adding PLG and product-led are adding sales teams and the complexity that entails. Then also here, we've got the power of channel. I think it's really interesting. We looked through the data and we saw from basically the responses that there was a similar degree of uptake on sales and of channel strategy. And channel strategy is something that's often overlooked in your go-to-market. But you can see here, there's very few that have tried and rejected sales or channel. But actually, there's a huge amount of people who are in that process of currently having one or planning to add one. And if we dig into this, it's super interesting. Tessian, for example, is a company that's moving to a 100% channel model to kind of build their scalability and penetrate that cybersecurity industry where referrals are really critical. And we also see a really strong correlation with community as channel from PLG businesses. I think PeerSignal found that 48% of PLG companies have an active community and are investing in community content versus 25% of the wider corpus of B2B channels. And it's important to know that this decision of kind of product-led or sales-led actually should be focused on the buyer. I'm not sure what the swearing policy is at SaaStock right now, but there's not many people that want to be forced to take a 30-minute sales call to get going. But the shift here is less really about being product-led and more about being buyer-friendly. How can you get them to value, to understanding fast? Very finally, a couple of points on pricing. I know we've got Patrick speaking, who's the veritable don of pricing, but we saw a lot of people, 20% of companies, having no change in their pricing or no set schedule, 29% of them, for changing their pricing. And we also saw that 40% of companies that alter their pricing regularly report a 25% increase in ARR as a result. If it's not on your schedule for this year, do it. And we found a whole bunch of interesting things, like if you're including tax in your pricing on your website, you'll grow 15% slower because that changes region to region, and many businesses are tax registered, and so they don't care about the tax. It artificially inflates the price. There are loads of pricing options. Usage-based is getting all of the buzz right now. 45% of SaaS companies are experimenting with it right now. But see all of these options as things that you can consider. And again, often here, more is more. When it comes to localization, when it comes to pricing, when it comes to experimentation, more is more. And more currencies, more payment methods, more pricing changes, and more go-to-market motions that are combined. It seems that the data is telling us it leads to more growth. So that's me for now. I want to make sure I finish on time and respect the fast pace of SaaStock. You're welcome to come to our booth. I know we've got a virtual one. We've got a whole bunch of people willing to chat if you'd like to find out more about how we enable a bunch of this stuff. But have a fantastic rest of the day. Enjoy the speakers. And thank you, Alex, and thank you, the SaaStock team, for a great event.
Thanks, Andrew. Great talk. And I think I put in the chat there, you put me off the camping holiday idea for the summer. But a great story and great presentation. And thanks again to you and Paddle.